The library was an ancient fortress of knowledge, its stone walls thick with secrets and stories that had lain dormant for centuries. I often found solace in its quiet embrace, especially during finals week when the world outside felt too chaotic and alive. Tonight, however, the air was different, charged with a tension that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. As I settled into my usual corner, the shadows seemed to deepen, stretching across the room like fingers reaching for something lost. My breath formed little clouds in the icy air, a reminder that I was utterly alone in this vast repository of books. The only sound was the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock, its rhythmic beat echoing off the marble floors. I hunched over my textbooks, pages whispering under my fingers, but the words began to blur. I rubbed my eyes and tried to focus, yet an unsettling feeling gnawed at my insides. The library was too silent, too still. I glanced up, my eyes darting to the rows of towering bookshelves. Their spines loomed like sentinels, guarding untold mysteries, their depths dark and inviting. Just then, a soft noise pierced the silence, a whisper, barely discernible, yet it sent a chill racing down my spine. My heart thumped loudly in my chest, drowning out the clock's ticking. I peered around, half expecting to see a fellow student, but the aisles remained empty. "It's just the wind," I muttered to myself, forcing a deep breath. But dread curled in my stomach like a serpent coiling tight. I tried to drown out my fears by diving back into my studies, but the silence was shattered again, this time by a soft thump. A book had fallen, perhaps, but I couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. I spun around, my heart racing. There, at the far end of an aisle, a figure stood shrouded in shadows. It was tall, impossibly slender, and my blood ran cold as I noticed the long dark hair cascading down its back. I squinted, trying to make sense of the silhouette. The dim lighting obscured its features, leaving only a dark outline against the shelf. Terror gripped my throat. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. I was rooted, unable to tear my gaze away. The figure began to glide towards me, its movements eerily silent. Panic surged through my veins. The air grew colder, a biting chill that seeped into my bones. A low, mournful moan echoed through the library, resonating with an unspeakable sadness, a grief that seemed to stretch across time itself. The figure stopped a mere few feet away, and I could feel its presence, heavy and suffocating. It raised a hand, its long, bony fingers reaching towards me. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart hammering against my ribs, bracing for something unspeakable. The room was thick with silence, broken only by my ragged breathing. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. I opened my eyes, panic subsiding into an uneasy stillness. The library was silent once more, as if nothing had happened. My heart raced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the very air around me. I glanced around, half expecting the figure to reappear, but the aisles remained empty, shadows shifting in the corners of my vision. Desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere, I grabbed my books and bolted for the exit. My footsteps echoed in the empty hall, the sound of my heartbeat thundering in my ears. Outside, the night was still, the moon casting an ethereal glow over the campus, but I felt anything but calm. The memory of the ghostly figure haunted me, its mournful presence lingering in my mind. I vowed never to return to the library after dark, convinced that I had brushed against something far more sinister than the mere shadows of books. Days turned into weeks, and finals came and went, but the memory of that night never faded. Each time I passed the library, I felt a shiver of fear, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had disturbed something sacred, a spirit bound to the shelves, forever trapped in its eternal sorrow. Then came the night of the winter solstice, when the moon hung low and heavy in the sky. A few friends convinced me to join them for a late-night study session in the library, laughing off my fears. "It's just an old building," one of them said, tossing a dismissive hand. "There's nothing to be afraid of." But the moment I stepped through the doors, the familiar chill enveloped me, wrapping around my spine like an icy hand. I felt it, the weight of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. As we settled into a study nook, the laughter faded, and an uneasy silence crept in. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. My heart raced as a cold breeze swept through the aisles, sending shivers down my spine. "Just a power outage," someone whispered, but I could see the worry etched on their faces. A soft thump echoed from the back of the library, followed by the same mournful moan that had haunted my dreams. My friends exchanged nervous glances, and I felt my heart lurch. "We should leave," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But it was too late. The figure emerged from the darkness, gliding toward us with the same unsettling grace. I froze, the familiar dread gripping my throat. It stopped just in front of me, and this time I could see its face, a pale visage with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through my very soul. "I have come for you," it whispered, a voice like rustling leaves. I stumbled back, colliding with my friends, but they were frozen in fear, unable to move. "Run!" I screamed, but the words barely left my mouth. We scrambled to our feet, the figure advancing, its hand outstretched. We raced down the aisle, but it was as if the shadows themselves were alive, twisting and turning, trapping us within the stacks. The library's doors slammed shut behind us, and panic surged through my veins. We were trapped, with nowhere to go. I turned to face the figure, a desperate plea in my eyes. "What do you want from us?" I shouted, my voice trembling. "I seek a soul," it whispered, the air thick with despair, "to share my burden, to find peace at last." I felt the weight of its sorrow, a crushing sadness that threatened to swallow me whole. My friends were paralyzed with fear, and I knew I had to act. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped forward. "Take me," I said, my voice steady. "I will share your pain." The figure paused, its expression shifting, confusion flickering in its hollow eyes. It lowered its hand, and in that moment, I felt a connection, an understanding of grief that transcended time. The air thickened, and for the first time I saw beyond its sorrow a glimpse of what lay hidden beneath. In that instant, the library shimmered, the shadows retreating, revealing the vibrant colors of the world around us. My friends gasped as the weight of despair lifted, the figure transforming into a radiant light. It smiled, a look of gratitude washing over its features. As dawn broke, we stood at the entrance, breathless and alive. The library, once a prison of shadows, now felt like a sanctuary. I looked back, knowing that the ghostly figure had finally found peace, leaving behind only whispers of the past. I left the library that day forever changed. I had faced my fears and discovered the strength to confront the shadows that lingered not just in the library, but within my own soul. I never thought my last school trip would become a terrifying legend, but here we are, years later, still haunted by that night. It started innocently enough on the old yellow school bus, filled with the eager chatter of my friends and classmates, all buzzing about our trip to Sleepy Hollow. Jake, Emily, Ben, and Chloe were in the back, our faces lit with excitement and a hint of rebellious thrill at being seniors. This was it, The last hurrah before graduation, a weekend of adventure and memories. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden hues over the landscape, and as we pulled onto the highway, the music blasted from someone's phone, drowning out our laughter. It felt like nothing could go wrong. That is, until we hit traffic. "Don't worry, folks," our driver, Mr. Thompson, called back over the din. "I know a shortcut. Just sit tight." The bus veered off the main highway onto a narrow, winding road. The cheerful chatter faded into an uneasy silence, a chill creeping through the air as we ventured deeper into the woods. Trees towered around us, their branches forming dark, twisted shapes against the fading light. It wasn't long before we hit a bump, and suddenly, the bus lights flickered. A collective gasp escaped us as the interior was plunged into darkness for a heartbeat. My heart raced, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. The lights flickered back on, and that's when I saw him. At the back of the bus, shrouded in shadows, sat a man in a long dark coat, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. An eerie stillness enveloped the bus as we all turned to look. I couldn't breathe. His presence seemed to suck the warmth from the air, leaving us in a suffocating chill. "Who is that?" Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. The man slowly turned his head towards us. I swear, I could feel his gaze piercing through the darkness. The shadows danced across his face, and I thought I saw a grotesque grin curling his lips. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. This had to be a prank, right? But the laughter that usually accompanied such jokes was absent. Then, in an instant, he vanished. Panic erupted. Students screamed, some crying, others huddled together in fear. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I turned to my friends. Jake's face was pale, and Emily looked as if she might faint. Ben and Chloe were clinging to each other, wide-eyed and terrified. "Pull over!" I shouted to Mr. Thompson, but the chaos drowned me out. Finally, he managed to pull the bus to the side of the road. "Everyone, calm down," he yelled, but his voice was shaky, and it only fueled our panic. I could see that he was just as terrified as we were. We were stranded on that desolate road, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to come alive with strange noises. Crickets chirping frantically, branches snapping in the distance, and the rustle of leaves that sent chills down my spine. Hours felt like days as we shared stories of the road we had taken, tales of disappearances and ghostly hitchhikers. The air grew thick with dread, each shadow looming larger than the last. "Did you guys hear about the hitchhiker?" Ben asked, his voice barely a whisper. "They say he appears to those who take this route. He's dressed just like the guy we saw." "Stop it," Emily cried. "This isn't funny." But it was too late. The fear had seeped into our bones, and we could hardly bear to look at one another, each of us lost in our own spiraling thoughts. After what felt like an eternity, Mr. Thompson finally managed to contact the authorities. We heard the distant wail of sirens, but when the police arrived, they brought little comfort. They searched the bus and the surrounding woods, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. I watched their faces, searching for reassurance, but all I saw were furrowed brows and uncertainty. "There's no one here," one officer finally declared, shaking his head. "You kids must have imagined it." Imagined it? I knew what I had seen. The memory of that figure haunted me, gnawing at my sanity. But what could I say? How could I convince them that the darkness had eyes? Eventually, we were taken to a nearby motel. Our trip to Sleepy Hollow abandoned. I felt hollow inside. The anticipation of adventure crushed beneath the weight of fear. My friends and I huddled together, exchanging glances of disbelief, our laughter now replaced by nervous whispers. The next day, we returned to school, our minds heavy with the ghost of the previous night. The events became a school legend, a chilling tale told around bonfires and shared in hushed tones in the hallways. They laughed, but deep down, I could see the fear flickering in their eyes. Even now, years later, I can still feel that chill every time I drive down a dark road. That night left an indelible mark on my soul, a haunting reminder that some roads are better left untraveled, that darkness can hide more than just shadows. The memory of that figure lingers in the corners of my mind, a ghost I cannot shake, a warning echoing in the silence. I never expected that moving to Northwood High would be anything other than a new chapter, a fresh start after leaving everything I knew behind. But there I was, standing at the end of a long, deserted hallway, drawn to an old locker that whispered secrets in the silence. Unlike the bright, polished lockers that lined the walls, this one stood apart, a faded red shell, rusting and neglected, a relic of some forgotten era. It had always intrigued me, though I'd never dared to approach it before. I could feel it calling to me, the air around it thick with an energy I couldn't quite place. Students often huddled together, speculating about the locker's history. Some said it belonged to a girl who had vanished without a trace years ago. Others claimed it was cursed, haunted by the remnants of the past. But rumors didn't deter me. I had always been the kind of person who sought out the unknown. My quiet demeanor belied a deep-seated curiosity, an insatiable hunger for the mysteries of life. On that fateful afternoon, after the last bell rang and the school emptied, I found myself standing before the locker, my heart racing. The moment my fingers brushed against the cold, rusted lock, a jolt of electricity surged through me. It was startling, yet strangely invigorating. I quickly pulled my hand back, breathing heavily, convincing myself it was just static. But deep down, I knew it was something more. It was an invitation, a challenge. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to open that locker. I had come prepared, equipped, with a pair of bolt cutters I'd scavenged from my dad's toolbox. The metal screamed as I cut through the lock, the sound echoing through the empty halls like a death knell. My heart pounded with each slice, the anticipation of discovery pushing me onward. Inside, I found a small wooden box. Its surface was intricately carved, with strange symbols that seemed to shift and change when I looked at them. I lifted it from the locker, and to my surprise, it radiated warmth. It felt alive, pulsating with a heartbeat that synchronized with my own. A thrill shot through me. I had to take it home. That night, my life spiraled into chaos. As darkness enveloped my room, strange whispers slithered through the air, calling my name in tones both familiar and foreign. I lay in bed, paralyzed by fear, listening as objects began to shift around my room. My heart raced as shadows danced on my walls, morphing into grotesque shapes that beckoned me closer. At first I thought it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind. But when I awoke gasping from nightmares that felt all too real, images of twisted figures and dark, endless voids, I knew the box was at the center of it all. Desperate to rid myself of this curse, I tried to get rid of it. I threw it in the trash, convinced that was the end. But when I woke up the next morning, it sat on my desk, gleaming in the sunlight, as if mocking my futile attempts. I buried it in the woods, thinking distance would break the connection. The next day, there it was again, on my nightstand, untouched, unscathed. I was ensnared in a sinister game, the box my tormentor. The whispers grew louder, the shadows more aggressive, and I could feel its weight bearing down on me. I began to dread sleep, the once comforting embrace of night transforming into a suffocating darkness. Each time I closed my eyes, the nightmares returned, vivid and relentless. I became a shell of my former self, haunted by the box and the presence it unleashed. My friends noticed my decline, but I brushed off their concerns, burying myself in denial. I couldn't let them see the darkness that had seeped into my soul. One evening, in a fit of desperation, I decided to confront the box. I opened it, hoping to discover a way to break its hold over me. Inside, I found nothing but a deep black void, an endless abyss that seemed to pull at my very essence. As I peered deeper, visions flooded my mind, horrors and memories not my own, a cacophony of voices crying out for release. I slammed the lid shut, panting, my heart racing as panic enveloped me. It was then that I realized the box was not just a container. It was a prison for something ancient, something dark and malevolent. I had unwittingly released it, and now it was feeding off my fear, growing stronger with every passing moment. The following days were a blur of dread and despair. I tried to function at school, to pretend I was okay, but the weight of the box clung to me like a shadow. I could feel the stares of my classmates, their whispers trailing behind me, as if the very air around me had become tainted. It was on a particularly dark night that everything changed. As I lay in bed, unable to sleep, the whispers escalated into frantic pleas. "Help us," they echoed, a chorus of desperation. I could no longer tell if it was the box or the souls trapped within it crying out. In a moment of clarity, I understood. I had to return it to the locker. I snuck into the school, the hallways eerily silent, each footfall echoing my trepidation. I reached the locker, heart pounding, the weight of the box feeling heavier than ever. I opened the locker and placed the box inside, a wave of relief washing over me. But as I turned to leave, the air thickened, and I felt an icy grip around my throat. The whispers morphed into screams, echoing my name in a cacophony of rage. "You cannot escape," they shrieked, the shadows swirling around me, engulfing me in darkness. I stumbled back, fear gripping my heart. I realized that I had not merely returned the box, I had awakened something far more sinister. The locker was a gateway, and I had fed it. As the shadows closed in, I knew I had to fight back, to break the cycle. With every ounce of strength I shouted, "I am not afraid of you." The darkness recoiled, the whispers faltering. I reached for the symbols carved into the box, tracing my fingers over them, willing them to respond. In an instant, a blinding light erupted from the locker, illuminating the hallway. The shadows shrieked and twisted, retreating as I closed my eyes against the brilliance. When I opened them again, the locker stood empty, the box gone, and the air felt lighter. I stumbled out of the school, gasping for breath. The whispers faded into silence. The locker was just a locker now, a simple relic of a past I could finally leave behind. But the weight of what I had unleashed lingered, a reminder that some mysteries were never meant to be unraveled. Northwood High was no longer just a new chapter. It had become a battleground for the forces of darkness. I had survived, but I would never forget the lesson learned. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed.